In the 44th year before Christ, Marcus Brutus participated in the assassination of Julius Caesar. He was not a violent man by disposition. He was a senator, a philosopher, a man who has spent his life studying the question, when is it justified to act against unchecked power? He made his case in the forum afterward, and the crowd listened. He was not refuted, he was exiled. And within 14 years, Rome had Augustus Caesar, an emperor with considerably more consolidated authority than the man Brutus initially killed. The surgery was successful, but the patient became something worse. And that gap between a diagnosis and an outcome that doesn't follow from it appears in every tradition that has ever thought seriously about power. Fiction keeps returning to it, and this investigation is about what it keeps bringing back.
Great Merlin's mutton chops! Me already know where this is going, and me want it on the official record that I'm not comfortable. Am's registering me discomfort, formally, in writing if possible. Please proceed.
The record will reflect that, but it won't change anything. Good evening. Coming to you from my library, where every villain on these shelves made an argument someone found difficult to immediately dismiss. Let's look at the examples in pop culture. Thanos. His claim was that the universe had finite resources, exponential consumption, civilizations that collapse under the weight of their own growth. And that observation was not invented. Resource depletion is documented. Ecological overshoot is a measurable phenomenon. And his solution was the random elimination of half of all life. And this is where the audience locate their exit from the argument. The premise is where they begin to hesitate. The premise and the solution are two separate things. The story requires the audience to reject them together, but they don't always.
Look, man, me am not saying he was right. I'm just saying, if he brought actual data, the Avengers might have listened.
Or he could have just used the omnipotent power of the stones to solve the problem differently.
Or that too.
Next example, Magneto, a man who survived the Holocaust, who watched the government systemically identify, isolate, and exterminate a group of people marked as biologically different, who then watches, in the Marvel Universe, as the world encounters a new population of biologically distinct individuals known as mutants, and begins a familiar sequence of registration, restriction, and containment. Some fans argue that his position follows directly from that history, that once a pattern of persecution is recognized, preemptive action becomes the rational response. The history he was drawing from was not fictional, but that argument has not been conclusively refuted in 60 years of X-Men comics. It has only been interrupted, repeatedly, and that is always the outcome.
Okay, me have to say it, because nobody else will. That man not crazy. He's right. Look at how they treat the mutants. It's only rational that he's afraid of another Holocaust.
Others will point out that his dispute is not about whether the pattern exists, but how it is acted on. Magneto's approach is to enforce his conclusion through violence rather than diplomacy. Even though his reasoning is rooted in historical precedent, his method is a matter of deliberate choice, and that is why the argument develops. His response and his choices is what labels him a villain. But those arguments won't hold up in the next two examples. Ozymandias from The Watchmen, a man who determined that preventing nuclear extinction required manufacturing a threat catastrophic enough that every nation would unite against it rather than each other. He killed 3 million people in New York, and the world unified. The bomb stayed grounded, and the plan worked. Alan Moore's story did not tell the reader whether Ozymandias was right. It refuses to answer that. And that refusal is the most structurally honest choice in the entire narrative.
3 million people! And it worked?
That's right.
I am intrigued. Continue.
Killmonger from the Black Panther. His charge against Wakanda was that a nation with the most powerful resource on Earth chose isolation while the global subjugation of African people continued for centuries. T'Challa does not defeat that argument in the film. He absorbs it, opens Wakanda, and changes policy because of it. Killmonger dies, but his ambitions win in the end. 4 villains with 4 diagnoses. None of the diagnoses are invented, and that pattern is consistent enough to be worth examining. But the pattern is not the investigation. What the pattern is concealing is what we are examining. Plato's Republic was written 4 centuries before Christ, and it proposed a society governed by philosopher kings, individuals trained so thoroughly in reason that power could not corrupt them. His underlying observation were, most governance systems fail because the people who seek power are the least qualified to hold it. Every coherent fictional villain is making a somewhat version of this argument. The diagnosis is consistent, and their prescription tends to always require someone to decide who the philosopher kings are, and that someone is ironically always the person making the argument. Plato acknowledged this problem, but even he couldn't provide a resolution to solve it, and neither has anyone else. That is not a fictional observation, that is just the current state of political philosophy.
Ah yes, one of me go-tos when want to fall asleep.
The Red Queen from Resident Evil, an artificial intelligence designed to protect the hive. When the T-virus escaped containment, she modeled the outcome and sealed the facility, killing everyone inside before the infection could spread. The humans who overrode her decision released what she had contained. The apocalypse she calculated became the world the franchise inhabits for every subsequent entry. She was not malfunctioning, she was functioning exactly as designed. So why was she overridden? It was not because her calculations were wrong, she was overridden because the correct decision was unbearable and the protagonist wanted to live.
Winston, if I say I agree with AI out loud, the internet is going storm our manor with ring lights and iPhones.
Well, that's nothing new to the family.
Yeah, good point. To hell with those influencers.
Syndrome from The Incredibles, a child who idolized a hero, was rejected and decided to build a world where rejection wouldn't be possible anymore. He creates technology that can give anyone superpowers, not to become a hero, but to remove the idea of heroes entirely. His mantra was, if everyone can be special, then no one is. It sounds simple, almost reasonable, if you don't look at it for too long. But some people argued he was pointing out something real. The Incredibles were born with their abilities. They didn't earn them, and the world reacted the way it always does. It either fears what it can't control or worships it. And from that angle, Syndrome's idea starts to resemble something familiar. A world where advantage isn't inherited, but where power is distributed instead of assigned at birth. That argument seems to show up often, but the question itself isn't the problem. It's what he does next. Because his version of fairness doesn't elevate anyone, it reduces everything. Not by giving people more, but by making sure no one has anything that sets them apart. And that's where the shift happens. Not when he identifies the imbalance, but when he decides the only way to correct it is through control, and through force, through destruction. The film calls him a villain for that, but it never fully answers the question he was proposing.
You know what they say? Never meet your heroes. Haha! You see what I did there?
The same structure appears across every entry. The diagnosis holds, the prescription breaks, and the hero defeats the person without answering the argument. That pattern is consistent enough to have a function, and this investigation is about what that function is. Look at what every single one of them identified. Resource depletion, institutional prejudice, complicity through inaction, the failure of human judgment under catastrophic stakes. None of these are fictional problems. The hero's world contains all of them, and none of them are ever resolved by the hero's victory. The villain is simply removed. The problem remains, and the next sequel introduces a new villain, making a similar argument. Because the argument was never answered, only the person making it was stopped. Stopping someone from acting on a premise is not the same as refuting the argument, but from a safe distance, it looks identical. That distinction is what we're about to uncover.
Winston, do you think the hero is just buying time?
The hero is treating the symptom. The villain is not just a manifestation of the disease. If you think this investigation is worth following to the part that implicates the audience directly, consider subscribing, because what comes next is where the evidence stops and the question begins. Who is the most dangerous character in these stories? Is it the coherent villain or the audience? A coherent villain produces a specific and measurable response that an incoherent villain does not. A villain motivated purely by power or cruelty requires nothing from the audience except rejection. But a coherent villain requires engagement. The audience must locate the flaw in their argument, must produce a counter, and frequently, not always, cannot do it cleanly at first glance. That hesitation is not failure of intelligence, it is the correct response to a real premise.
To whoever's watching this, I would take that compliment. He doesn't give them out very often.
Don't read too much into it. The mechanism underneath the appeal is that the coherent villain externalizes a thought the audience already had. A thought they have not said out loud because saying it out loud requires either acting on it or acknowledging that they won't. The villain says what everyone is thinking and the audience recognizes it, not as endorsement, but as something closer to confirmation that the thought was legitimate to begin with. What the audience does with that recognition is the question. It is not the question the story consistently declines to ask. Fiction provides the argument, lets the audience engage with it, then resolves it through the hero's action. So the audience never has to decide what they would do if the hero weren't available. The catharsis of resolution is manufactured without any of the conditions that would produce the resolution in reality. The problem that generated the villain is present at the beginning of the story and present at the end of it, and then the credits roll over an unchanged world. Alan Moore refused to answer whether Ozymandias was right because answering that question would have ended the real argument the story was trying to preserve. That refusal was the most honest structural choice available to him. It is also the rarest one.
So what you are telling me is, our entertainment industries make us feel the weight of these arguments and then have somebody else resolve them so we never have to decide anything ourselves. That's one hell of a roller coaster, man.
That's right. And here's what that cost. Not the story, but the people watching it. After examining the evidence, the most useful villain in fiction is the one who makes sense, and also the one most often wasted, because the story usually ends the same way, not with the argument being answered, but with the person making it removed. Magneto is imprisoned, the Red Queen is shut down, Syndrome is turned into shredded cheese, and the problems they were pointing to don't go anywhere. They're still there, waiting for the next story to pretend it's new.
But Winston, yeah, Killmonger died, but Wakanda opened. T'Challa changed everything because of what Killmonger said. And Ozymandias, the plan worked, man. The bombs stayed down, and the world unified. Them achieved what them were after. Them just had to make a big sacrifice. That is not the argument being silenced. That is them winning.
That's right, Toombs. The villain whose argument fails is easy to dismiss. The one whose argument works is not. Because now there is no distance left. The outcome already happened. And the only question that remains is what it cost. What concerns me is not that the audience finds these arguments compelling. The arguments are compelling because they are real. What concerns me is the use fiction is being put to. We appear to be using it as a container for arguments too large and too uncomfortable to hold in conversations that have real consequences. The story provides the lesson, lets us engage with it emotionally, and then removes the teacher. So we can leave having felt the weight of the question without having to have answered it. That is one function fiction can serve, but is not the only one available, and I am not certain it is the most honest one. The Red Queen sealed the hive, the humans overrode her, and the apocalypse she had calculated became the world the franchise inhabits. The audience watched that sequence across multiple films and rooted for the humans. That is worth sitting with, not as condemnation, but as information about what we are willing to acknowledge in fiction that we are not willing to act on in reality.
But Winston, the Red Queen was very...
Scary. Don't be
competent. I was going to say competent.
Of course you were. The argument is still in the room. It has been there the entire time, and that is the part nobody wants to say out loud. So in closing, the villain was right about what was true. The hero was right about what to do. And the audience went home without having to decide which of those things matters more. The argument is still in the chair. It has always been there every time you walk past it. The villain was just the one who kept pointing at it. But these are just my observations.
Sweet Jesus. I think I need a Tylenol for my headache, man.
If this case file interests you, there is another one examining the Joker and Light Yagami, characters whose arguments are not easily disproven, only contained. It connects to this investigation in a way that becomes apparent partway through. It is on screen somewhere.
Somewhere over there, probably. I I don't have hands. This is my best.